On this week's episode at Nutrition's My Life, we're talking with Alix Turoff, and I am really excited to have this guest. I was a guest on her podcast, and I will make sure to link everything and we can share it all. And we started talking and we're like, oh my gosh, Alix has so much she can offer, my population over here of the thyroid world, because we're going to be talking a lot about weight loss and eating disorders today. And I'm really excited about it because, this is something that is definitely a specialty, a niche, and Alix is going to be able to kind of open your eyes and kind of help guide you a little bit throughout this. So Alix, you wanted to tell us a little bit about you and kind of what brought you here?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It was
Welcome.
so fun to record with you. I'm excited to be here. My name is Alix Turoff, and I am a registered dietitian and personal trainer. And like many of us, I got into this field because of my own interest in nutrition and its use in my own story. So I was a very underactive adolescent, and as a result, I had put on weight I would say middle school is really when I started noticing it. So for me, my issues with my weight were not, looking back on it, it was not like I was in danger, my health was in danger. But I remember pediatricians telling my parents, you have to watch if she continues gaining weight, then it's going to be a problem. I remember dance teachers telling me the same thing. If you want to move up in dance, you're going to have to lose weight at some point. It's not a problem now, but it's going to be a problem. And just these messages constantly. And I think whatever the media was around that time growing up, it was very different. There wasn't really a lot of representation of different bodies in the media and magazines. And so I had really negative body image issues. And at some point I decided I wanted to lose weight. And it was like something just snapped. And all of a sudden I was determined to do it. And I had no idea how. And that was really the issue, because the only thing I knew was you just have to eat less. I was not a very healthy eater. I did not have a very big palate. So I wasn't already eating a ton of fruits and vegetables and lean proteins. So that was part of probably my weight issues. But now I am like 14 years old and trying to lose weight without any real knowledge of nutrition other than you have to eat less. And that became less and less and less. As I lost weight, I needed to eat even less. And at a certain point, now probably around 16, I had lost quite a bit of weight and I felt good in my body, but I felt miserable with everything else because I couldn't be a normal kid. I couldn't go out with my friends because they wanted to get pizza after school. And that wasn't something that I was allowing myself. And I saw what a negative toll it took on my body and my mental health very early on. And luckily I have great parents who were aware of the issues and they were like, hey, you should probably see someone for this. So I was lucky in that someone recognized this was going to become a bigger problem if we didn't get professional help, like a therapist and a dietitian. And I was really lucky to have those people early on in my life to help guide me, which is really what led me into the field to hopefully be that for someone else. I read a book recently by Josh Peck from Drake and Josh, and he talks about these people in your life who are your apostles, and they sort of bring you to the next place that you're supposed to be. And I felt for me, that was really what the RD that I worked with and therapist that I worked with was. And so I realized I could be that for other people, which is what led me into nutrition.
It's a crazy story to think that you were that young and having those thoughts, but it's a beautiful story because you were able to overcome that. And now you're able to help everyone else that have gone through similar situations like that. Man, that's crazy. So you were really young. And is that something that you find with a lot of your clients as well? Is that a lot of this negative self-talk started from a young age?
I would say the majority of my clients do have a long history of just being wrapped up in diet culture. I will say, as the broad generalization of all of the different components that go into it. For many of them, it started with mothers who were dieting when they were young and that influence that had on them. And for other people, it was bullying in school, or it was a pediatrician or a dance instructor, or gymnastics, something like that.
Mhm.
And then I have women that I work with who really didn't start to experience these issues until after having babies,
Yeah.
and later in life. But many of them do have this thread, whether they recognize it being a source of their current food issues. Many of them don't realize that their upbringing and the influence that their mother had on them and the influence that their food environment had on them is part of the work that they have to do now. But I would say it's more common than not.
Yeah, it's sad. Yeah, I've unfortunately heard some crazy stories, and it just breaks my heart when I'm, on the other end, and I'm like, wow, like having this one that stands out in my mind was this one lady. She was like, she came to me because she had no thyroid, and we really had to work on her relationship with food, because that was the major thing. And when she finally opened up to me one day, she told me that growing up, her mom would tell her, hey, after I've had 5 bites, you need to take the food away from me. And so she was like in charge of regulating her mom,
Wow.
and so, but then that carried on over, because after she had her thyroid removed, she struggled with her weight, and then her mom continued to portray her issues now then on her daughter. And it was one of those things, like, I didn't know, and I've learned a lot along the way. And I'm really excited that you're here to kind of help us out, and kind of share some of the best tips that you can, to overcome some of these things. But I had her write a letter to her mom, not send it. And I was just like, you need to handle what you're going through too. She needs to deal with her stuff as well. And then we need to come together at some point. And that's what ended up happening. And they ended up having a beautiful relationship. And the crazy part too is she lost 2 pant sizes like within a month after that, because of all of that, like,
The
emotional,
release.
like, distress had just been released.
Yeah. And I will say, to the defense of the moms, many of them don't realize that they're doing
Exactly.
it, that they're unhappy in their own body. And I think it's definitely different now. There's more education, there's more awareness, but they're just unhappy and they're doing their own thing. They're not meaning to make their kids feel that way, but the
Mhm.
kids pick up on things.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and so now in your work, what are some of the things that you see as far as disordered eating or eating disorders? And I mean, because that needs to be addressed first before any weight loss can come about, right? So what are some
yes.
of the things that can happen with a poor relationship with food?
Yeah. So I think it's very tricky because it's a fine line between an eating disorder and disordered eating. And many people might fall into the eating disorder category, but haven't been officially diagnosed, and thus they don't take it as seriously because of that. So I would say first, if you feel like you might have any signs of an eating disorder and you're not sure, NEDA, which is the National Eating Disorder Association, is a good place to start, just to kind of screen whether or not your um, behaviors and your thoughts and your any clinical symptoms are veering into eating disorder territory, because the treatment is going to be very different for someone with disordered eating and an eating disorder. So I will say that. The second thing is that disordered eating can take on so many different forms. And we have, especially in the RD space, weight management is not a very popular field to be in, because there's a lot of research on weight stigma and fat bias being a reason for people being overweight in the first place. So recommending intentional weight loss isn't appropriate for everyone, but I truly do think that some people, once they've done a certain amount of work on themselves, can then safely and healthfully focus on weight loss. But the mental part has to be there first. So like you said, that those things have to be worked out before you can safely focus on weight loss. So a lot of what I do, even for people who don't realize that, they just think they're chronic dieters and that they can't lose weight, but really they have so many misbeliefs around food and so much just nonsense from every diet that they've been on, starting with like Weight Watchers when they were 9 years old, to Atkins when they were 12, and then Nutrisystem, and then intermittent fasting and keto. And they take every rule from all of these diets and try to make them work together, which you're left with not being able to eat anything. And then if you have a thyroid issue on top of that, and you're like, I can't eat bell peppers or tomatoes or gluten or dairy, and I can't eat past 9 o'clock, it is impossible to figure out what to eat. So we kind of wipe all of that clean. I like to say we wipe the slate clean, and we're going to relearn just the basics of nutrition: protein, fat, carbs, how to put a meal together. And even if we're not directly focusing on weight loss, by fixing the relationship to food, if you are above where your body wants to be, a lot of times the weight starts to come off without hyper focusing on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And how do you handle those times where, hey, I'm trying, I know I need to do these things, but this negative self-talk just keeps like hanging around? Like, what are some of the day-to-day tips and tricks that someone can use to overcome that, those negative voices that you're not good enough, you should have cut those calories, you screwed up, right? I messed up this meal. I just rest of the day is just, whatever. Like, how do you overcome that?
So I call that the magnifying glass effect, where we have this desire, or we have this really something in ourselves where it makes us focus on like the worst thing that we ever do and blow it up. Mm-hmm. So let's say you go to a party, and it's a Super Bowl party, let's say, and there are wings on the table, and you have more than you allotted for in your head going into it. You have 6 wings, and you're like, I was only going to have 2. I'm the worst. I completely wrecked my diet. I'm fat. I'm worthless. I'm never going to be able to do this. I might as well just eat all the rest of the stuff on this table. And because we take that one thing that we did, we make it into such a big deal. And then we assign the same value to like every part of us, where because we ate the food, we are not ever going to be able to do this, and we're worthless. So what I tell my clients in that situation is, let's just take a step back. We can reflect on behaviors that we're not proud of without completely beating ourselves up. So we can say, all right, I'm not thrilled that I had more wings that I planned on having, but let me understand why I did it. Maybe I went into the party too hungry. Maybe I skipped lunch or a snack before. Or maybe I just really like wings and they're delicious and I never make them. So maybe it would be better if I incorporated this food into my weekly routine because I love them and I won't feel like I can only get them at one time. Or maybe I was distracted and I was talking to people, and before I knew it, I just overate. Or maybe I just got a text from someone I'm dating and it upset me, and so I ate emotionally. Like, any of those things can be fine, and you're not bad for doing it. What would you do differently next time so that it could go better?
Yeah.
And then we move on. And then, you can course correct next time, so you can reflect without completely beating yourself up. We don't have to ignore these things that we don't like about ourselves, but we can meet them with more grace and kindness.
Yeah, exactly. That's the exact approach that I've seen work for so many people too, is just label it. What did I do? Like, it's okay that I did this, and then figure out why, right? Like, was I hungry? Was everything that you mentioned? Like, it's okay to have those moments, and it's okay to have days where you're not perfect too, right? Because no one's perfect. So it's just labeling those, recognizing it. And that way, then you like, okay, now I know what it could have been. Now, next time I have a better game plan.
Yeah, totally.
And do you find that some of those game plans, or whatever you want to call it, like, does that lead to more anxiety? Because there's a lot of anxiety around the food, right? Because that goes hand in hand.
Yes. So it can. So for some people, they're like, they go into a dinner and they're like, I don't want to look at the menu before. That's disordered. That's going to make me stress out. I just want to be normal, which is totally valid and fine. And then there are other people who look at the menu and they calculate all the calories and they track all the points, or like all of the food before. And if they go one little bit off of that, they spiral. And then I think somewhere in the middle, like having a general game plan going into it can be helpful. And I like to look at that more on a weekly basis. So I'd say take stock of your week. And let's say you have 4 dinners out this week for social plans, for work, you're meeting your mom. If I am trying to lose weight, if I have 4 dinners out, all 4 of those dinners can't be like the best meal that I've ever ate. 1 or 2 of those has to just be a regular dinner where I am lucky someone else is preparing this for me, someone else is cleaning up, I'm trying vegetables that I might not have tried at home, but I'm not going to make it like my last meal on earth. And that's a different mindset going into it. And then there's some meals where you're going to a really special restaurant. Let's say you just got an amazing reservation that you've been waiting for, and there's this amazing pasta dish that you really want to try. I would tell you to have that, because if you don't, chances are you're going to be thinking about that pasta until you eventually binge on it or overdo it at some point. So I think like there's a way to practice some restraint without complete restriction and making choices. I look at it like a budget. If you had a certain budget, let's say you're saving up for a house, going and buying a Chanel bag might not make the most sense depending on your income bracket. But you might be able to go into Starbucks and pick up a latte without thinking about it so much. And it's the same thing with food. You're not good or bad, but what's your ultimate goal, and do your choices align with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, you said a couple things that were just really like important for people to hear, but what do you say for someone who, that's not necessarily is not trying to lose weight or anything, just wants to feel better? They just like, I've had so many years of just not feeling well. So when you go into that mindset, okay, I'm not trying to lose weight, I'm not trying to gain, I'm not trying to do anything with my body, but just feel good. How do we get in tune with those feelings of like, okay, I'm actually, this food is making me feel good, or this one doesn't make me feel good. Like, cause you have to go along those lines too with eating.
Absolutely. You need a baseline. And that's what I think is so hard when people say, just listen to your hunger, because some people can, but many people, they've gotten so far away from what hunger and fullness and satisfaction really is. So for them, I would say it can help to have more structure before you have less structure. So structure can be really bad and it can be really extreme, or it can be a stepping stone to understanding your body. So I usually start people with like having breakfast, lunch, dinner, and probably at least 2 snacks, like an afternoon snack and maybe an after dinner snack, depending on their day, maybe a morning snack. But before, people will often ask like, I don't love breakfast, do I have to eat it? And of course, like you don't have to eat breakfast, but you don't really know if you like breakfast or not, because many times when someone says that, they're overeating at night. And so they're not hungry in the morning. So if I just like to first, like, let's have a better foundation and like just restructure things. So then you can start to tell if you eat breakfast at 9 o'clock every day, if one breakfast keeps you full until 12 and the other breakfast you're hungry at 10, now you at least know you have something to compare it to. But if you're all over the place and like some days you're under eating, some days you're overeating, it's hard to know what's working or what's not. So I'd say like control as many variables as you can, even if it's just for 2 weeks. And then you can adjust. Like, what happens when I add an extra ounce or 2 of protein to my salad? Do I feel more full or more satisfied? Are my cravings better later? So I think like having a foundation to work with is what I would tell someone for that, because it's hard to know what to change when everything feels like it's a mess.
Yeah. Yeah. I have people that like to use like, the Fitbit or anything to track their calories. And I'm like, all right, we're going to do that for a little bit. So that way you can understand like your portion sizes. And so, and I I always tell everyone, I'm like, I'm not the weight loss. I'm not a dietitian. Like this is, if you want to go someplace else, if like you want to go see Alix, if not, but what sometimes I notice that in my clients that have been so structured like that is that they might have a lot of inflammation in the stomach lining, causing those hunger cues to be gone, right? Like if you have that inflammation, it's just you can't feel full, you can't feel that hunger. And so what kind of do you like promote some anti-inflammatory foods to kind of help out with that? And if so, what kind of foods do you find is more helpful?
Yeah, I think a lot of people who have diet issues and especially have been dieting for a long time have stomach issues that are associated with it. And sometimes they're not sure, do I just have IBS or is it my diet that's causing that? So that also comes down to like, let's kind of clean things up first. Let's see if a lot of these issues get better, because if they do, then we don't have to go digging for problems. What then, especially if you have like you're eating every couple hours, you're sleeping, you're drinking water, you're moving. Now, if something's off, it's going to be more obvious. So I think what usually I do work with people with GI issues, and sometimes they've done a lot of exploration and they're like ready to do a full-blown elimination diet and get to the root cause. But for others, they find they're bloated, but they're also binging at night. So which is it? Or they're not going to the bathroom, but they're not getting enough fiber. So once we like get a balanced diet, then we can see what we're really working with. And always fiber and water are two of the things, and movement, really actually like the three pillars I would say are so important for everyone, but especially if you're having any kind of gut issues. If you're not first doing the basics, I always say like you have to get the basics before you go to all the supplements, because
Exactly.
if you're not eating any fiber, you're not drinking any water, no supplement is going to help you with that. It might just mask more problems. So I would say like the three things is like movement, sleep, definitely getting enough fiber, which might be something that you work up to. Women need 25 grams of fiber per day, men need 38 grams. Most people are not getting anywhere near that. And so working that up and then getting enough water to go along with that. And then like I always say, like most of the things that you do for weight management are just going to be generally healthy things. So like anti-inflammatory foods are going to be a lot of the things that we want to incorporate already, because they are also they're more filling, they're higher in fiber, higher in water content. So definitely like fruits and vegetables, and I know like you, I wouldn't recommend cutting out a vegetable because it might be inflammatory, like bell peppers, because there's so many benefits in them that I don't think that helps. But yeah, and then there are some people that do have bigger underlying issues for inflammation, like IBD or thyroid issues, and then that's a whole other layer.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, and you said the layer perfectly, because that's what I talk to my clients about, is that there's a foundation diet, right? Anti-inflammatory, and then we build upon that with other health issues, right? And one of the things that I find for my clients that are really anxious around the food and everything is I tend to be like, if you're not seeing a therapist, like, can you go find one?
Yeah, totally. It's so important.
Exactly. I think, and I'm so grateful now that for like growing up, like when you said that you got help, and I was like, oh, I wish I would have gotten help, right? I didn't get that help that I needed at a young age. And it's just I love it now that we're in an age where it is normal to ask for that help. Right. It is normal for parents now to say, oh, my child might need this. And it's such a great way to look at it, as just you're learning tools to help you out. Right. That's what all of this is. Like, you have your mental health toolbox, you have your GI toolbox, you have all of these things. And it's just grabbing all of these tools that are really helpful for you. And what other tools have you found that have been really helpful for someone who is struggling with either their weight or just the relationship with food?
Yeah, I definitely think therapy, if that's something that you haven't explored, that's a big one. And many of my clients do work with the therapist as well. And as dietitians, we sometimes collaborate, so we're all on the same page. I do think like the sleep is a big thing. And I know you talk about that with your clients. If you are not sleeping, you can't expect to feel good. So like that's key, like morning routines and evening routines. whether it's super complex or not, it doesn't need to be, but something to start your day and end your day, just to have the routine. So I think routine is one of the biggest things for my clients, like having a regular grocery shopping routine, having these staple meals that you know you really enjoy that work for you. I think those are the key things. And then movement. And lots of people have really negative relationships with exercise because they've overdone it, or they only will do high intensity Orange Theory classes, but they hate running. Yeah. So for me, it's helping them find some kind of movement that they really enjoy, whether it's just walking and listening to a great podcast or doing a boxing workout at home. I think over the pandemic, there were so many more classes at home that people could try. So just getting them moving and doing something. And once you move your body, you just feel so much better and everything else falls into place. So I think those are the big things.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that movement does so much. It's a stress reduction, right? So it's going to get that cortisol out of the body. It's going to, or at least the byproduct of that lactic acid to like move through the body more. You're going to help out with returning that blood flow to the digestive tract. So that way things kind of move better for you. So you're not uncomfortable. And then if you can do it, bonus points outside, like you get that nature quality to like allow to combat that stress. And I find that people that have the most trouble with their relationship with food are the ones that are most stressed, that don't get outside very often, that aren't doing those extra tools, because nutrition only gets you so far. We have to couple it with everything else that you just that you were just discussing.
Yeah, overall life. And I think even like evaluating relationships with other people in your life. If it is your mom that had a really toxic relationship to food, you might have to set boundaries there. Or a partner or any of these things. There might be friends that are not great influence for you. So setting boundaries, these are all things that are non-food related that really do play an important role. And then I think like the one other thing I should mention is a lot of these diety type foods have a ton of sweeteners or sugar alcohols or ingredients that can make you not feel so great. Some people can tolerate them and they're not going to kill you, but they can have like a lot of negative digestive impact. So I think like taking some of those out, like getting some of the protein bars out, like what can we have instead of as a snack that is going to make you feel better with just some, like returning to the whole foods and the basics. I don't like to say clean and dirty. You're not bad for having a protein bar. We all need convenience foods, but you will feel better if you return to some of like the more whole foods.
Exactly. I tell people, think of like, if you lived on a farm 200 years ago, what would you be eating, right? To kind of take it back to that basics. And then I also encourage people to, I call it, I don't know where I grabbed this term from, but like there's soul food, like something that like hits your soul, that like reminds you of baking, cookies with grandma or the cinnamon rolls on Sunday morning, and allowing yourself to have those, because food is fun. Food is a relationship with the people, right? Because that's how it I know, I'm sure you learned it in school too, like turn off the TV, right? Have that conversation at dinner time, try to eat as a family, if you have that ability. And that just kind of, I thought of something earlier and that just triggered me to kind of circle back to it. What would you say to someone who is going through their own difficult time that has children? Like, because we want that cycle to stop with them, right? We don't want that to continue dripping down to their kids and then their kids and continue to have this poor relationship with food. So how do you address, that as if someone that's a parent?
Yes. And so I will say, I got a lot of these things from some other guests that I've had on my podcast that work with kids. But number one would be addressing your language around your body and food. So if you are using words like this food is good, this food is bad, this is a cheat day, or this is, something that we only have once a year, or this is fattening, or I look fat in this, or I don't like my body, those things, if that's the only thing you can do, start evaluating your own language. It's going to help you too, but your kids do pick up on that. So number one, address your language. Number two is the family meals, trying your best to have them when you can, but also not having a different meal than your kids, really like the whole family eating the same thing. And that doesn't mean you can't eat more vegetables or like you can't mix cauliflower rice into your rice. You can do that. But if you are sitting there with your Jenny Craig meal and your kids are eating pasta, they're going to wonder why mom can't eat the pasta as well. So modeling that for your kids is super important and letting them know that. And then I think the other thing is what you're keeping in the house. So it's a fine line. I don't have kids yet, so I will say this is probably easier information to give, harder to take, but having a good balance of treats in the house where they know that if they want something sweet, it's not this terrible thing. But also placing limits on when they're having them. So whether it's at the table, and Ellen Satter is the one, she does the division of responsibility with kids of how you should be feeding them, like who decides what to eat and when to eat and how much to eat. But, like being careful to say you can only have this once a week, because what happens is they go to school and they are going to eat it, or they're going to go to a friend's house and raid their cabinet. They're going to find ways to have it. So not putting it on such a pedestal.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I love all that. And yes, Ellen Satters is fantastic for helping out with that. One thing that I've noticed, I do have kids, 7 and 9-year-old, and my 7-year-old is obsessed with numbers. He's my math whiz. And he is now looking at calories and protein and carbs and everything. And so at 7, I'm having that weird conversation of like, okay, or with myself, like, how do I approach this? How do I talk about this? And the only reason why he like I said, he loves numbers. And so he started asking me questions about it. And so we now start talking about like how that's just literally energy, right? Our calories are our energy, and we just kind of drop it at that. But grandpa was here this weekend, and my son started talking about that, and grandpa's like, well, we don't have to worry about that. You're not. And I was just like, oh, we're just talking about energy here. He knows that what he's reading is just, it gives us energy. And we're starting to learn that when there's energy that's just carbs, you kind of poop out faster, basically. And then if they have protein or something in it, that energy lasts a lot longer. And so we're trying to put those like words into him because he's curious about it, because he sees it on his packaging and stuff like that. So I think it's like you said, trying to have the parent understand what that language is to come out. Because I had to say the same thing to my husband a couple of months ago. He was on his weight loss journey, and he said something about his belly being fat. And then my son heard that and said it a couple of times, joking to my husband about it. And my husband got upset. And I'm like, well, he doesn't understand. He just sees you as dad. And then you pointed out this, so I was like, we need to be really aware of the language that we're using here, because they do, like, you don't think about it, but they soak that up like so fast. It's so difficult. But that's the thing, is I want to make sure my kids have that good relationship with food, that they know that it's okay to eat certain things and listen to their body. And I think that's the hard thing. If a parent is having a hard time listening to their body, how do you then teach your child to listen to your body? So I love all these tips, because it's something that we don't think of that's happening all the time, but it happens more often than we see it, or than we think.
It's really hard.
Yeah. So if you could leave us with a couple, extra tips that we haven't discussed yet, what do you think? Like, hey, I really wanted to say this. What could you leave us with?
Yeah. So I think if you're just getting started, or maybe you've been dieting forever, trying to lose weight, if you're going to focus on anything, I think that if you focus on what you can add in, it's much more positive than focusing on everything you can't do. So like, can you be getting 20 to 30 grams of protein per meal? That's like a very basic thing. You don't have to count calories, but you can understand what does 20, 30 grams of protein look like at a meal. That's like very rough guideline. But if you did that, if you got 20 grams of protein 3 times a day and then some at snacks, like you're just meeting like the RDA, which is the recommended daily allowance. So that's going to help majorly. Number 2 is I think like planning ahead is very simple, but underrated. If you can like get groceries in the house, get things that you enjoy. It's okay to use packaged food and take shortcuts. In fact, it's much better that getting a rotisserie chicken from the store than ordering pizza and takeout every single night. So don't try to be a martyr with this stuff. Like you take shortcuts, you can have help, you can buy things pre-chopped. It's better than like you're gonna get plastic anyway when you order the takeout. So like we're just trying to do our best. So like that I think is we have to prioritize just like what is better than where I am right now. And you can work up to best. You can work up buying everything at the farmer's market. That's amazing if you can do that. But if you're starting from ordering takeout every single night and you're putting the pressure on yourself to make everything from scratch, you're never going to get there. It's too big of a leap.
Yeah.
So I think like simplifying it a little.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I would say like getting movement in, a really basic place to start is just looking at your steps. If you are not getting any movement at all, I'd say that's the first place to start. And it doesn't have to be 10,000. Look at your stats right now. If you have an iPhone, like the Apple Health app, you can see generally like on, okay, most days I'm getting 2,000 steps. I'm going to aim for 3,000 this week and work slowly up, but it's going to be slower than you want it to be. So hang in there. But, you know, as you make changes, you can set a new goal each week. So if you get that 3,000 steps this week, then next week you can decide, do I want to set another movement goal, or maybe I want to work on my water? But you can keep building and building on these things.
I love it. I love it. And do you give your clients like here, these are the things that we will eventually focus on, I think will be benefit, and then they choose kind of what they feel like is important at the time?
That's a good question. I always paint like the big picture of like, this is where I want us to be by the time we're working on. You're going to understand fiber in foods, you're going to understand protein, you're going to understand your calorie needs. But right now, this is what we're focusing on this week. Like, this is what I think is going to make the biggest change. And I say, like, what's the lowest hanging fruit? What can we do that is going to make the easiest thing that we could possibly change that's going to make the biggest benefit? So where can we get the most bang for your buck? And for many people, that's just like, let's just focus on one meal for this week. Like, let's just overhaul breakfast or tweak it. And then that changes a lot of other things. Like, then it changes your cravings in the afternoon. It changes whether you're overeating after dinner. So I think like, what thing can you work on that will have a trickle down impact?
Awesome. Well, this is fantastic. I'm so excited that you were here and able to, share the insights and, the ins and outs of what's going on and what can be really beneficial for people. So where can everyone find you? Where do we go from here?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Definitely have to listen to Nicole's episode on my podcast. It was amazing, all about thyroid health. But the best place to find me is on Instagram. My username is Alix, which is Alix with an I, ALIX, Turoff, TUROFF_RD. And if you click on the link in my bio, you can kind of find everything else, the podcast, you can find my website. So that's where I would go.
Awesome. Awesome. And everything's in the notes here. So you guys can just easy click or copy paste and get to her Instagram from there. And thank you so much again. This was really fun. This is really helpful. And I'm so grateful that you were here to help everyone. So thank you
for having me.
Yeah. And next week we will be on with another episode at Nutrition's My Life.